There are numerous other injustices that occur which are directly linked to being held captive, and it would be impossible to speak here today without mentioning them. For example, the families that are left to pick up the pieces are faced with a largely unseen and unheard battle. I think it's appropriate and important that today we acknowledge the struggle that women have to endure when their husbands and sons find themselves interned. Within prison, core issues of controlled movement, isolation and forced strip searching remain unresolved. The blame for that lies squarely with the prison administration and MI5. Daily provocation and intimidation is carried out by sectarian screws whose masters are hell-bent on trying to provoke a reaction. It's a battle a day within those walls, under those watchtowers and behind those doors. Republicans who are lucky enough to be given bail can find themselves facing severe restrictions. This can become a living nightmare and can be impossible to live anything that even remotely resembles a normal family life. Late night checks, daily bail signing, draconian curfews and being forced into exile are the order of the day. Those who find themselves tagged not only have to endure Crown Force harassment, but they also find themselves being harassed by their lackeys in the G4S security company. Even those who serve their time after completing their sentences are subjected to further punishment, with many finding themselves with severe licence restrictions being imposed and being unable to return to their homes to live. Probably the most blatant example of internment in recent times is the case of Derry Republican Tony Taylor. A lifelong Republican, Tony has already spent many years in prison. More recently, he was taken without charge or trial and thrown into McGabry at the behest of a British Secretary of State and MI5. Sadly, most people are oblivious to these issues. Some simply have their heads in the sand and ignore the fact that it is happening. Many will tell us to move on and stop living in the past. Our message to them is simple. We aren't living in the past. These issues and injustices that we're faced with are very much part of the present day reality. Being involved in Republican struggle, we know only too well what the risks are. We know what we're faced with. We know and we accept that we can go to prison, but we aren't deterred. If we were deterred, then none of us would be standing here today. Comrades, as we leave here today, I want to ask you all to continue to highlight what is happening. Continue with the protests, continue with the pickets, continue with the activism. A brave soldier once said we all have a part to play. No part is too great, no part too small.
And the last speaker will be speaking on behalf of the Moore Street, Save Moore Street from demolition. Dermot Brannock. Dermot.
Arja, Gurmagi, Sean Lahar is Gurmau, and Anti-Internment Committee as Curda Hurstun, Sanctuary Control. Neil Saoirse Star, there is no freedom without history. It's a saying in Irish and it's a saying that should be said in English as well, because every struggle has a history, and also the people who want to prevent us having our freedom are the ones who try and take our history away. History's not dead, we're all part of history. All of us here, standing here today, are a small part of history. We're part of the history to continue to struggle against internment, which has been brought back into this country. In the north in particular, in the 6 counties, but also creeping in the 26. History isn't just about battles, but it is a lot about battles, but it's also a battleground itself. We find that in history, historians take different sides. There are historians who do applaud the history of the struggle of the people and don't try and conceal it. But there are also historians who try and twist our history, who try and make our heroes and martyrs out to be villains, who tell lies about our history or who try and conceal it. Neil Saoirse Star. The people who control history control also the people. On the Friday of Easter week, the GPO in flames and the roof about to fall down, the garrison evacuated. First came one load of Cumann who left, and then another load of Cumann left, also taking the injured down to Jarvis Street Hospital. The rest of them then left in another 2 groups. One group charged the barricade at the end of Moore Street, where the machine gun mowed them all down, killed or injured every single one of them, and another maybe 200 entered the buildings and began to tunnel from house to house along the street until they'd occupied a whole terrace of 16 houses, and some on the other side as well. For some strange reason, that history was kept from us over the years. You've all seen, I suppose, the film Michael Collins. You've seen them coming out with their hands up out of the GPO. That didn't happen, but that's what we thought happened. Then strong financial reasons came for our history to be concealed for us, and especially the history of Moore Street. In the years of the 70s, when Dublin began to crawl with property speculators who ripped up buildings and took over buildings to build themselves little empires there, that was when the struggle for Save Moore Street first started. 16 years now that struggle has been going on. Eventually the state conceded that 4 houses should be made a national monument, 4 out of a terrace of 16. They wanted to build a shoebox museum in the middle of a shopping centre, a giant shopping centre all the way from O'Connell Street into Moore Street and all the way from Parnell Street down to Henry Street, nearly a half a mile square. In this shopping centre you could have maybe this little museum with a toilet and a cafe in it, maybe next to a McDonald's on one side and a Starbucks on the other. And in order to build these 4 buildings, they were going to pull down the neighbouring ones, but people intervened. People took charge and occupied the street, occupied the houses and stopped that demolition. And then they occupied the streets outside for another 6 weeks, until eventually a judge, a High Court judge, gave a decision that not just the 4 houses, not just the 16, not just the street, but the whole quarter was a monument, a national monument, a battleground. So, big celebration, of course, for all of us. But what happened next? The Minister of Heritage, if that's what she is, decided that she would appeal the decision. And the speculator, who has a plan to build a shopping centre, applied for an extension on that shopping centre plan for another 7 years, which the council will probably grant him. Neil Saoirse gan star, there is no freedom without history. We are all a part of history. We need to know it and we need to defend it. Not for the past, or not just for the past, but for our present, for our future and the future of our children and generations to come. A future free from colonialism, a future free from speculators, a future free from vulture capitalists. And as part of that resistance, there's a march next week. There are posters, leaflets there on the table, not just announcing the march, but also on the other side explaining what happens, and I would encourage you to take it. I would encourage you to stand and to march shoulder to shoulder with us in Dublin next week as we tell the state and the speculators that our future is not for sale, our history is not for sale, our heritage is not for sale, and Moore Street should be a battleground and made a national monument. For Monaghan.
Again, on behalf of the Anti-Internment Group of Ireland, I'd like to thank everybody for attending today. Thank you.